Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. I'm going to speak this afternoon about IBM's view on how security needs to change in the current era, in the 21st century. This is a little bit about me. If you have questions after the presentation, you'd like to send me an email or do a phone call, please feel free to do that. I'd be happy to speak with any of you. So, our world has shifted over the last 15 years. The types of security incidents that we had in the past were mostly disgruntled employees and unsophisticated hackers that we used to call kiddie scripters, right? The world has really changed. Over the last 15 years, criminals have taken on our systems as the easiest method to make money with the lowest risk. So in the past, people robbed us with a club or a gun on the road. When we started to have railroad trains, it was easier for the criminals to get more victims at one time. In the 20th century, that shifted to telephone scams, which were even lower risk for the criminals and produced good results. But today, this has really shifted to professional criminal organizations who spend all of their time and effort attempting to break into your systems and my systems. And that requires a shift in our responses. We have to be as professional at protecting our resources as they are at attempting to take them from us. Over the last 4 years, we've seen a huge increase in the number of breaches that have occurred around the globe and in the sophistication of the types of attacks. This particular graph shows 800 million records breached in 2013, up to 1 billion in 2014. Last year, I think we calculated it was about 1.2 billion to 1.3 billion records. The little circles are the larger circles, or the larger the circle, the larger the size of the breach. You'll notice there's a lot of gray circles there. Those are undisclosed breach types. In other words, the people who lost their data weren't sure how they lost it, right? Which is significant in my view. But the key at the bottom shows the types of attacks. Average cost in the US of a data breach today is over $6.5 million in direct costs, right? Indirect costs are substantially higher in terms of legal fees, fines, brand reputation, loss of additional sales. So these are significant events for the companies concerned. The larger the company, typically the larger the dollar size, but even smaller companies, it's a significant enough problem that it can potentially drive them out of business. The most important point to me is the average time that it took to detect these breaches, almost 9 months, right? And I don't put all of the blame on this on our IT teams and our internal security teams. I put a lot of this blame on the sophistication of the types of attacks that are being currently managed, right? The criminals have a different approach to how they're both breaking into your networks and how they're capitalizing on those breaches into your network. So, what changes? For us, the biggest change is that we need to change our strategy, right? The tools are tools that, a lot of the tools are tools that we've used for many years. We still have firewalls, we still have network penetration testing, we still test applications, right? But our approach to those, how we use those, we feel like it needs to change. And the key to that for us is supporting the CISO and the CIO. For the first time, they're interested in security, because for the first time, the cost of security are now material to them. The potential risks are now material to the business, right? And so they have a much higher interest in this. If you look at the activities on the bottom, right, strategy and risk compliance, cybersecurity, data security, all of those are things that we've been doing for a long time, right? There's not anything new there. What's new is that we have to change our approach to these areas of security, right, to support a strategy that provides leadership from IT and cybersecurity to the CIO's office, provides a rapid transformation, and allows us to integrate our solutions so that we don't have a set of silos or stacks, but we have an integrated security solution where we can adequately talk to the CIO. Right? So IBM's approach to this, if I can talk over the rain, is to innovate around 5 key trends, right? So these key trends that we've seen are we have these very advanced threat types. They're new, right? We also have cloud, and the cloud has changed the perimeter, and because of the change in the perimeter, we have a lot of different attack vectors that are available for us. The third thing is the compliance mandates. So our compliance requirements are increasing every year. They're getting stronger in Europe. They're getting stronger in the financial sector. They're certainly getting stronger in the US. And finally, we have mobile and the Internet of Things, right? And together, right, these 5 trends, right, help drive the development of the strategy that we have around cybersecurity. All right, so I'm going to talk about 4 different themes that we're going to use to organize the strategy today, right? So the first of these is optimizing your security program. The second is stopping advanced threats. The third is protecting your critical assets, what we call the crown jewels that you have. And finally, the fourth is to safeguard cloud and mobile, right? All right, so we're going to start with optimizing your security program. Now, again, you have a security program now, right? We all do. Right? But what we think is necessary here is to change its structure essentially to shift from being reactive to being proactive. So we want to stop checking things after they've happened, right? Focus on prevention, focus on rapid response, right? In order to do that, we think we should take advice from experts who've already done this, right? Who've been successful at doing this for other organizations, right? So the first goal that we have here is 24/7 monitoring, right? So we all have security tools in place. They all have logs. They all generate alerts, right? But to date, most of the organizations we work with haven't adapted to a 24/7 monitoring system where we're monitoring all of the security tools that we have in a comprehensive fashion, and also monitoring the systems and data that those tools are protecting, so that we have those all in one place, right? So the activities on the top are very common. Again, firewall management, managed protection services, malware defense, right? The changes here that we're suggesting are on the bottom row, right? Incident planning. At this point, we believe that you can't avoid an incident, right? So if you can't avoid it, what are you going to do when you have one? You need to plan for your response. You need to have proactive preparation, right? You actually need to practice the activities that you're going to do. You need to review those plans on a regular basis. And then when you have an incident, you need the triage, right? You need a response. The response needs to be immediate, and you need to manage it appropriately and carefully, both for the size and severity of the incident, and also to manage your Cs, right? Your CEOs and your CISO. Right? After you've got the incident triage, you need to contain it and eradicate it and figure out what went wrong, right? You have to figure out what was done, and then you've got to recover from it, right? And then finally, the post-incident analysis. We want to try and prevent this incident from happening again, right? So In the middle, the advantages to this approach in general are better security for your information assets, better compliance, improved systems uptimes, right? Hopefully at lower cost when we're all done, right? IBM has been successful at this with a number of our customers. This particular case for a bank, we installed a security operations center. It was protecting 60 million banking customers. During the first 6 months, we identified 650 events, security incidents that were blocked for the bank. These were incidents of a type that were not blocked for the bank previously. We are still dealing with 13 plus million events daily in the operations center, 400,000 plus assets being looked at and managed as endpoints, 28,000 log sources. And we managed to do this for $2 million a year less than they had been doing it in-house. So it was a significant improvement. But the improvement relied on the planning strategy that I showed you in the previous slide. All right, so our second theme is advanced threats, right? And so again, as I started off, the threats today are much more sophisticated than they have been in the past. The malware types are a much wider variety. There's literally tens of thousands of malware exploits that are in use today, and they morph quickly in the wild. Right? So our approach for stopping advanced threats is essentially to use analytics and insights to improve an integrated response. Right? So the analytics are critical here. We want to do three specific things. We want to defend against web fraud. We want to prevent these targeted attacks in real time, and then we want to try and detect those attacks with threat intelligence. Right? So the first goal, defend against web fraud and cybercrime. So in order for us to defend, we really need to do three things here as well. We needed to prevent the root cause of the fraud, right? And so the root cause is either malware that's being inserted into your network or phishing attempts to gain access through trusted people into your network. So if we can prevent those activities from being successful, you can prevent the malware from being inserted into your network. Right? To do this, we need to be able to identify those malware and those phishing attacks and shut them off before they're successful. Right? Second point, assuming that the first point fails, we need to discover those compromised devices. Right? So we need to test the devices, the endpoints on your network, servers and PCs, et cetera, smartphones, on a regular basis to make sure that they're not compromised. And if they are compromised, then have the appropriate response, right? Lock them out until they're remediated, right? And in order to do this successfully, while these threats morph and evolve, we need to gather real-time data so that our responses can adapt as well, right? It's not okay to use last year's virus signature, and it's not okay to use last year's malware analysis for the attacks that we have today. Right? This only works if we've got centralized management around both the endpoint security and the fraud protection activities. Right? So it needs to be something that's constantly managed to be successful in an organization. All right, our second goal is to prevent targeted attacks in real time. Right? So what's a targeted attack, right? So the typical attack chain on the left is they break into your system. Once they're broken in, they latch on to a system or a server. Once they have that toehold, right, in the system, they expand. So they either expand their permissions within that system or within that server, or worse, they expand permissions to other servers and systems in your network, right? Once they're there, right, what is happening now is that these systems, the malware goes quiet. So it lurks in your systems for weeks or months. So we have very, very patient criminals today, right? they're playing a long game, and they're trying to make as much money from you and take as much as they can from you, right? And the game that they play is to gather as much information as they can until they get the information that they need, which is typically your most secure credentials, right? And then exfiltrate it, right? They send it back out to their host, right? So what we want to do is we want to break this chain as early in the process as possible, right? So if we can prevent it, that's the ideal set. If we can't prevent it, we can detect it and respond to it. What we learn from the response, it goes back into prevention, right? So the goal on the attack chain is to look at the endpoints, prevent the malware installs, right? Control the channels, and primarily prevent credential loss. I've been working on the Swift banking hacks the last couple of weeks, right? Determine part of IBM's team how they happened, what the appropriate responses are, and what the failures were. It's pretty clear to me at this point that there were two primary failures. The first was that the endpoints were not properly protected, and so the fraudsters put code on the systems. The second problem was that the critical credentials for the Swift network were not properly secured and managed, right? Those two failures caused the majority of the problem on the bank. On your network, right, we want to prevent these mutated exploits from changing and shifting off to different servers, and we also want to prevent them from communicating back to their host, right? So if we can do that, we can at least prevent your information from leaving your network, right? And at the data level, we want to check that the data is being used appropriately by the fewest number of people, at least the most sensitive data. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. All right, next goal is to continuously monitor the activity across the organization. So again, this system only works if this approach only works if it's real time and it's an active response system, right? So this isn't something you can turn on and walk away from. You have to have people actively viewing this, actively managing it, actively monitoring it, actively responding to the incidents that occur, right? So it's important to break this into two pieces. So the first is the pre-attack analytics, right? So we all test our systems, and we all know that sometimes our systems have a vulnerability that we know about that we can't patch today, right? So we do some kind of a remediation effort. It's important to note those to the people doing the monitoring so that they can take special care monitoring those systems, right, where you have a known vulnerability, right? After the fact, right, we want to detect those anomalies, anything that's outside of normal behavior, right? So there aren't red flags that come up and say, you know, your system has just been stolen. It's behavior that doesn't look normal, right? That's what you need to look for. So this is the detection set of the three pieces, right? The next is the response, right? So our goal here on the response is to rapidly investigate, rapidly respond, and rapidly learn from these breaches, right? So we want to reduce the time it takes to discover what happened and when by substantial numbers. Remember, at the beginning of this, I said that the average time to figure out that you had a breach was 265 days. That should be a matter of minutes, not months, right? If this system is properly monitoring your endpoints, you should know that you've had a breach within minutes of having a breach. And you should be able to respond within that time frame as well, right? So we had a customer that I talked to yesterday, right, who's was uncomfortable because they had a notification from their system that they might have a possible breach. They had a second notification 24 hours later that they might have a possible breach, and the systems went down about 12 hours after that. The CEO very reasonably said, I don't understand. You had two notifications that you had a problem and you didn't respond. You know, we really don't have an excuse for that, right? So reducing the time to discover that you've had a problem and reducing the response time is critical, right? The easiest way to manage this is to enforce continuous compliance on the endpoints, right? So for those endpoints that you control, right, and again, we don't control all of them anymore, but for those that you control, making sure that they're compliant with your security policies makes your life a lot easier. And so monitoring those endpoints for compliance regularly, right, and continuously is an important factor to consider. And finally, the emergency response service, right? Given that we feel like you will have a breach, who's going to respond? Where's the team? What's their preparation? How much training have they had, right? Are they ready to go in and do what's necessary to take care of the problem rapidly, right? And if this is a public breach, are they ready to talk to the press? Are they ready to talk to your legal team, right? Whatever's necessary to do this, they need to be ready to respond. So the response covers everything from the planning of the response to the immediate activity from the notification to the analysis after the fact.